Hello, I'm Edward October. Over the years, I've narrated more ghost stories, horror shows, and creepypastas than I can count. And yet, the crimes discussed on our true crime podcast managed to scare the shit out of me. This program is not suitable for children or the faint of heart. If you are such a person, go ahead and switch off this podcast. Listen to something else. Are you still with us? Well, we've warned you.
Hey, Jen.
Cam, how you doing?
I'm doing pretty good today. Rainy. What is today? Tuesday? I don't even know.
Yeah, it is Tuesday.
It is Tuesday.
Yeah, so it's not a rainy day and Monday kind of getting you down kind of thing.
No,
right?
rainy day and Tuesday makes me happy.
It's been raining so much.
I love it.
I
need to move to Seattle or Rochester, New York. Actually has more rain than Seattle. Maybe I need to go there.
Little trivia for you, everybody out there.
Little trivia. It's amazing.
What you got for us today?
Woo. This is something. You know, I say this
so
jokingly.
You got something to us for us, right? Okay.
This one made me tear up, and that doesn't happen a lot with me. And
I know.
You'll find out why. Just
You're
because
an emotionless shell of a person.
I told you it's my cold dead heart, and I guess my cold dead heart isn't so cold and dead after all.
I know. Maybe that's why we're good together, because I'm over emotional and you're non-emotional.
Usually I try to look at this through all that, but this one you'll see. You ready to go?
Yeah, let's do it.
Here we go. Today's case takes us to Mason City, Iowa. It's July 25th, 1993, and like most school-age kids, summer, woohoo, is the reward after being stuck in a classroom for 9 months. 9 months here in the States, by the way. 6-year-old Amber Duncan was no different. After an afternoon of playing on a slip and slide with her best friend, Brittney, Amber headed home around 3 p.m. in the afternoon, still wet from a day of fun in the sun and water. As the little girl waved goodbye to her best friend, no one could have known it would be the last time she'd be seen. But Amber wasn't the only one to go missing. What followed were years of agonizing questions and desperate searches. This is seriously one of the most disturbing cases I've ever covered, hence, like I said it at the beginning. And the man at the center of it all is the real-life Walter White. Obviously, if you listen to the show, you know how much TV Jen and I do. Walter White is the main character from Breaking Bad, one of the best television series ever made.
Love Breaking Bad. It's so good.
It's February 1993 when federal agents start cracking down on drug dealers across the Midwest. As is often the case, those arrested quickly, they're not so big and brave, turn informant, hoping to cut a deal. The agents aren't interested in these small-time operators. They're after the kingpins. In this case, Greg Nicholson was the small fry, and the big catch was a man named Dustin Honken. Now, Nicholson agreed to give up his dealer, Dustin's name, as his supplier, and even to wear a wire. During the recorded meeting, Dustin spilled some of the secrets of his drug operation, leading to his arrest. Now, Dustin was charged with manufacturing and intent to distribute, and this was meth, that terrible, terrible drug that was hitting big time at this time. Now, officers didn't fully grasp the extent of Dustin's capabilities or just how dangerous he was. Dustin was released on pre-trial release with no prior offenses, and, because he was so young. How dangerous could he be, they thought.
I can answer that.
Yeah, you're about to see.
Pretty darn dangerous.
At first, Dustin informed his lawyers that he intended to plead guilty. However, he stunned the court at his arraignment by announcing, you know what? I changed my mind. I don't want to plead guilty. Not only that, Jen, but he boldly told the prosecutor to his face, hey, your case isn't as strong as you think. Which was quite shocking because the prosecutor, one of the TV shows I watched about it, he's like, never in my long career has anybody said that to me.
Quite full of himself. Yeah, that's...
Funny you say that. My next sentence. This moment offered the first glimpse into Dustin's incredible arrogance and defiant, you can't get me attitude.
Mm-hmm.
Prosecutors had to build a solid case against Dustin Honken for trial. Their first step was to gather witnesses to testify. But wouldn't you know it, Jen? Greg Nicholson was nowhere to be found. Now, Greg, had turned informant and pretty much was going to help put Dustin away. But to do that, you have to find him. They can't find him. In January 1995, the court moved to dismiss the case because, with Greg missing, there was no witness that was available to testify. So there it goes. There goes his, we got one person missing and Dustin's moving on. A little backstory about Dustin. So Dustin Honken was born in Britt, Iowa, which is west of Mason City in north central Iowa. His father, Jim, was an alcoholic schemer who had a very powerful influence over his two sons, Jeff and Dustin. Now, Dustin would say that his father abused him, but it was actually the alcoholism that caused the abuse, which is so often the case for a victim. You can't see it and you tend to, make excuses for them. His journey into the crime world started early and guess what? At the hands of his father. Jim once convinced his son to steal and copy a key to a bank, which Jim used to then commit, that's right, 2 bank robberies before getting caught and sent to federal prison. Now, the way Dustin was able to get the key is the mom worked at the bank, so he just stole it from his mother. Dustin's parents divorced when he was 9. Dustin was, however, very close to his mother, who provided a loving environment in which to raise him. His sister, Alyssa, said that Dustin was abusive to her. When he learned that his sister told his girlfriend he was cheating on her, Dustin took a pillow and attempted to smother his sister. Another time, Dustin held his sister underwater when a failed attempt, or maybe a little attempt, to drown her, causing her to swallow a ton of water before he finally let her up out of the water to breathe. Early on, Dustin excelled in math and science and writing, and he even earned a scholarship to North Iowa Area Community College in 1991. He had planned to become a pharmaceutical lawyer. With his freckles, fair hair, and tall, slight frame, Dustin looked a lot like a college-aged Doogie Howser. In fact, he wore those big round glasses, with the, you know what I'm talking about, that were popular.
The big 80s, yes. 90s glasses, yeah.
Yes, he wore those. He does not look anything like a drug kingpin, I'll tell you that right now.
That's probably why he gets away with it.
Dustin would drop out of college just after 1 year. But while he was in college, he learned something valuable: chemistry. He decided he no longer wanted to be a pharmaceutical lawyer, but instead he set his goal on not just selling meth, he wanted to make it. He wanted to be a drug lord, and by 1992, this normal-looking all-American kid was running a huge Midwest meth empire. Now, as he and his friend outgrew their meth operation, Dustin did exactly what Walter White did. He moved to the desert to continue making meth and money.
Was it in an RV? Did you do the whole RV
No,
thing?
they rented a house.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's okay. Just as any good CEO, Dustin put people he trusted in positions of power. His good friend Tim Cutcomb joined him as they made their way to Tucson, Arizona, to continue what they had started, but on a much larger production. Within a year, Tim and Dustin successfully manufactured multiple pounds of some of the purest methamphetamine, distributing their product predominantly in northeast Iowa.
Pounds, right? You said pounds. That's a lot of meth.
Oh, and you want to know how much meth it is? This would give you an idea. Netting them hundreds of thousands of dollars. They were making a lot. 2 other men rose to the top ranks of his drug empire. And this would be 2 users who then became his dealers. And that would be 32-year-old Terry Dagius and 34-year-old Greg Nicholson. During one of his trips from Arizona back to Iowa, Dustin was introduced to Terry's girlfriend, Angela Johnson. When she got Dustin alone, she told him that she thought Terry was using meth. In fact, he was using more than he was actually selling. And perhaps that maybe, the 2 of them, meaning Angela and Dustin, should start dealing with each other. You know where this is going to go. Mm-hmm. That's right. The 2 fell in love, and Angela would eventually get pregnant with his child. Angela also had a rough upbringing. Her mother struggled with alcohol, was neglectful and abusive. So Angela was turned over to her grandparents who raised her. Now, probably what would be on the opposite end of that spectrum Her grandparents were devoutly religious, and they would often pray over her with the Bible, speaking in tongues in order to exorcise the demons out of Angela. She was exactly the type of person who would look up to and fall in love with a person like Dustin. All seemed to be going great for Dustin and his booming meth business, but what Dustin did not yet know was that drug dealer had been arrested, Greg, and had agreed to cooperate with police. Following a search by the Mason City Police, approximately 150 grams of high-purity meth and nearly $5,000 in cash were discovered at Nicholson's residence. Now, Greg is his dealer. So, of course, faced with the prospect of, a long prison term, Greg Nicholson opted to cooperate with law enforcement. Now, with the help of Greg, Dustin Honken and Tim were both arrested on federal drug trafficking charges in March of 1993. Knowing what Dustin could and would be capable of, Greg became paranoid. After all, Dustin had told Greg he could put a hit on anyone that crossed him, including Greg. This was all too much for Greg's wife, and she was like, I'm out of here, and the two of them separated. With nowhere else to go, Greg reached out to a newfound acquaintance, 31-year-old Lori Duncan. Now, Lori was a devoted mother and a Navy veteran, and she was also aware of Greg's past history with substance abuse, but he told her about his recent rehab stay and that he was currently sober, which he was. After he got arrested, that probably does sober you up quite a bit. Always compassionate and willing to assist those in need, Lori offers Greg shelter in her home alongside her cherished daughters, Candace, who affectionately goes by Candy, and she's 10, and 6-year-old Amber Duncan. Little did Lori realize her new friend and roommate, and then boyfriend, had just ratted on a formidable drug kingpin known for his ruthless reputation, and they would all pay the price for what Greg did. So sad. Just like a couple times during this case, Dustin would be released on bond after pleading not guilty, and he had one thing on his mind, Jen. You know what that is? Revenge. Now, while revenge can be quick, justice can be slow, and that is exactly what happened with this whole crime. On July 26th, Lori's mother drove by her house and immediately got a bad feeling. She went home, just sat there, talked to her husband and said, hey, you know what, let's go drive past again. And when they did, they said, let's try to get in the house. Now, at first, nothing was glaringly amiss in the house, but there were signs. The dinner was still on the kitchen table untouched. There was a note that Lori had left a neighbor. It said, quote, Phyllis had to leave on short notice. We'll be back shortly. Love, Lori. Just a few days later, something unusual occurred, and I'm sure you're going to be shocked, Jen. Shocked. Just shocked. Dustin handed his lawyer a videotape, and on that videotape was his former friend and drug associate turned redcoat, Greg Nicholson, recanting all of his statements. Dustin didn't do anything wrong. At this point, that Dustin, who was going to plead guilty, has changed his mind. He's not pleading guilty because he didn't do anything wrong. Listen to Greg. Now, you know what they say, Jen. In fact, one of my episodes was called this: No witness, no crime. The case against Dustin and his partner, Tim, was dropped on July 30th, 1993, because, again, there's no witness. The two men get back to doing what they did best, and that was continuing to build their drug empire. Government is still after Dustin, so they're going to try again. They're going to approach Dustin's other business partner, and that would be Terry. And I know you're going to be shocked here, but a funny thing happened shortly after that, too. On November 5th, 1993, Terry disappeared. He went missing, too.
Huh.
Now, before going MIA, Terry told his mom he was going to go over to meet up with Angela and that she had wanted to rekindle the relationship. Now, if you remember, Angela and Terry had dated first, and then when Angela met Dustin, those two hooked up. After leaving to go meet Angela, Terry was never seen or heard from again. Meanwhile, Dustin is doing what he does best. That's, firing up that old drug shop and get that going. He meets a man named Dan Cobain and brings him into the mix. In the fall of 1995, Dustin recruited this man, and he wanted to help him manufacture meth. His business is getting bigger. It's great. What Dustin did not realize is that, guess what? The feds had already got to Dan, and he, from the get-go, agreed to be a police informant. So, yeah. It all came crashing down on February 7th, 1996. Officers got a search warrant for Dustin's house. Inside, they located all of the materials needed to manufacture methamphetamine. Once again, Dustin and Tim, bye-bye, are arrested and they are indicted on federal drug trafficking charges. And, I know you're going to be shocked here, once again, they let Dustin out on bond.
Now, of course they did.
We all suspect we know what happened the last time he was out on bond. Well, things don't change, do they? Dustin started to make plans to kill this guy, Dan. He's going to kill him. But he's not going to just kill Dan. He's going to kill some police officers. He's going to basically kill anybody that could ever come up against him and, put him to jail. Anybody that could be an issue for him, they got to go. Knowing things aren't looking too good for either man, Tim, they're all fallen. Hey, you know what? When you have a business with drug criminals, they're all gonna, you know what it is. So Tim decides he's going to become an informant too. Now, Tim and Dustin were good friends for a long time, and they started this business together. But the reason this all happened was Tim was pretty sure that Dustin was involved with the disappearance of both of his former associates, and Tim was scared he was going to go down for it, but also, and even worse, he was afraid he'd become another victim. During a wiretap, Dustin talked about killing a person or people, and he compared it to a football game. Quote, once you go a certain distance, there ain't no turning back. And when Tim, who's his friend, because he's wired up, of course, asked if it bothered Dustin to kill people, his response was, quote, nope, never think about it, never dream about it, never nothing. Thought I'd have nightmares.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
Nice guy, right? When the feds got what they needed on that wiretap, finally, Dustin's bond was revoked and back to jail he went. Always the busy killer bee, Dustin got to work trying to make plans. Dustin disclosed to fellow inmates that he had murdered witnesses from a previous case, and now his sights were set on his best friend and co-associate, Tim. But in order to get Tim, he had to get out of jail first. So Dustin and another inmate came up with a plan to escape. They would knock a hole in the cell because Angela, the girlfriend, ever the dutiful, loving girlfriend, would, sneak a hacksaw to them. Thank goodness guards caught wind of it before it ever happened, so it did not happen. Finally, Dustin Honken was convicted of manufacturing and distributing meth and sentenced to 24 years in federal prison, which later got extended to 27 years. Due to his cooperation in the case, Tim would plead guilty to a lesser charge, and he was sentenced and served 4.5 years. All this time, Dustin's sure he's not staying in there 27 years. He's getting out. He's going to get out to continue to do what he loved. But thankfully, he was wrong. Finally. With Dustin in custody and that disturbing wiretap, police had some intel, but they needed more. They needed to know, of course, where are the bodies? Just like a movie. I love this next part because I could just see it unfold. Enter a man named Robert Bobby Jean McNeese, who was doing life in prison for attempting to import $5 million worth of drugs to the U.S. He's doing life.
Only $5 million?
Only $5 million.
Yeah.
Now, not only was he a prisoner, Jen, but Bobby, he had some connections. While he was serving his time, a member of the New York Mafia contacted him inside and recruited him to run a drug trafficking system within the prison. Of course, Bobby agrees to distribute drugs inside the prison, and I'm going to be your right-hand man, until he got caught, because, that's not ever going to successfully, you're going to get caught sooner or later. Just like the rest of them, without not much of a choice, he decided to cooperate and become the ever-dreaded snitch. While authorities learned that Angela Johnson was about to disappear out of town, hightail it out of there, during the summer of 2000, investigators came up with a plan. They indicted her with aiding and abetting the murders of Greg Nicholson, Lori Duncan, Candy, Amber, and Terry. Police were pretty sure that Dustin did the actual killing, but they knew Angela had helped him. They knew that she was involved. They just didn't quite know how. What they needed to do is prove that Angela was in on it and get the location of the people that were murdered and dumped, thereby putting both of them in prison for life. Or maybe more. We don't know yet. Knowing that Angela was not exactly a hardened criminal, they put her in near a new best friend. You know who that new best friend's going to be? Bobby. Bobby, the mafia criminal drug guy.
Good.
Now, Bobby, the whole agreement, Bobby agrees to do this because he's already in trouble for that, distributing drugs in prison. So what they need Bobby to do is work hard to get in Angela's good graces. When Bobby said that he knew people, talking to Angela, of course, he knew people. In fact, he knew a lifer that was already serving life, and he'd probably take the rap for her on all of this because the guy had nothing to lose. He was already in prison. But there was just one problem. Okay, that was a lie, of course, but also all Angela needed to do was tell Bobby all the details so that his friend would have all the correct information when he confessed to police.
Mm-hmm.
Who falls for that, right? Well, she did, apparently.
Somebody did, yeah.
Bobby
you wouldn't be saying it if you didn't.
That's right. Bobby recorded and made notes as Angela gives him all the horrid details of how the 5 were murdered. And this is exactly what happened. It's brutal. Dustin was out on bond that first time during the summer of 1993. Dustin and Angela borrowed a car from a friend, and they had one mission: to find Greg Nicholson. Now, at first, the couple wanted to find him alone and just take him out. But the timing never worked out. They could never do that. He was kind of always just one step ahead of them. So they had another plan. Angela would pose as a lost salesperson. She had approached the house in which Lori and Greg were staying in and say, she needed assistance. She was lost. She needed help. Now, when Greg would let her inside, because, she's a woman and that there is a man in the house, not that that matters, but you would be more trusting to let a woman in that was lost. He let her inside. As he let her inside, Dustin was right behind Angela and barged in, right there, right then. Now, the couple would be forced by gunpoint to do that infamous video statement that would exonerate Dustin. Greg was forced to say what they had told him he was going to say, that he had made false statements, and Dustin's a great guy and shouldn't be charged when you have a gun to your head.
Terrific guy.
Once they got that, Angela and Dustin would gag Greg and Lori with socks, and these are the little girls' socks, by the way, little tiny girl socks, and tie them up. Then Angela told the little girls that, hey, we're all going to take a little trip. It's a fun trip. It's a surprise. Angela even told them, you know what? You need to go to your bedroom and pack a bag for the getaway. Pack your swimsuits, your socks, all the good stuff that, that we'll be needing.
We're going to have fun, right?
Dustin and Angela made Greg, Lori, Candy, and Amber get in the car, and they drove to a location nearby. It was really only about 10 minutes from Lori's house, but it was a desolate area. Once there, Dustin took Greg and Lori deeper into the woods by walking them in. Gunshots rang out. Dustin returned to the car alone. He then took both little girls from the car back into the woods, and again, gunshots rang out. All 4 were buried where they were killed because Lord. Dustin had went there earlier to dig a shallow grave. That little baby girl's 6 and 10.
I know.
Just a few weeks later, Angela reached out to Terry, that was the other drug associate and informant, and told him that she wanted to meet up and talk about getting together, wanted to rekindle their relationship. Terry, okay, sure. So the plan was to meet at a local club, which they did. Then Angela and Terry drive to a nearby house, which it was an abandoned house, and I'm kind of guessing maybe Terry thought that, there'd be a little, wink, wink, because why would you get in a car and go to an abandoned house? I don't know. But anyway, that's what they did. When they get to the abandoned house, Dustin was waiting for them. Once inside, Terry was beat savagely by a baseball bat, shot, and then buried. That's right, not very far away from the other people that Dustin had murdered. Courtesy of Angela herself, you ready? She even provided maps to her good best friend, Bobby, to where the bodies were located. And that's how the authorities figured out where they were. Investigators had what they needed. Using dogs and sonar technology, they head over to the map area. It would take 3 days to find the bodies of Greg, Lori, Candy, and Amber. All of them had been shot once execution style in the back of the head. Little Amber, little sweet Amber, 6-year-old, still was in her swimming suit from playing on the slip and slide with her best friend, Brittney. Nearby, they found Terry's body as well. Now, when news broke of this in the prison, that the bodies had been found, Angela, as you can imagine, was pretty much like, oh no. She tied a bedsheet to a bar and attempted to hang herself. She failed. Dustin Honken would finally face justice with his trial starting in September of 2004. With investigators finally realizing just how dangerous this baby-faced nerd was, he was bolted to the floor and donned a stun belt, which could be activated at any time should they need to do it. Dustin was charged with a multitude of charges, including murder and witness elimination. There were 17 counts in all. U.S. District Judge Mark W. Bennett, this is crazy, had to have police protection 24 hours a day along with his family. This is how dangerous that they're finally realizing Dustin is. And get this, all the jurors, their identities it was hidden from all. They were bused to and from the courthouse. Their names were not published. They were not identified, right? They were scared to death that Dustin was going to try to take some out. Lawyer Alfredo Parrish would defend Dustin during the murder trial. In all, 65 witnesses would take the stand with various tales to tell about Dustin. In the almost 2-month-long trial, 10 women and 2 men saw tons of information and heard from all these witnesses. Each person had a story to tell, including a prison inmate that Dustin told he killed rats and he killed children that were raised by rats. Dustin talks a lot, let me tell you.
He does. Probably better because now he's, caught.
So if you listen to my episode that I just did on Sarah Tokars, which was just, I think, 2 weeks ago or 2 episodes ago, you'll remember that in it, I said that her husband, Fred, the lawyer husband who hired a hitman to kill his wife right in front of his young son's eyes, made an appearance in another case I was working on. Surprise! This is it.
This is
Small
the case.
world. This is it. So Fred, as I stated in the other episode, he became a snitch because he was really serving time and hoping that he, snitching on people that he was serving time with, could shave some years off his sentence. It didn't work, by the way. So Snitch Fred testified that in 1998, Dustin described strangling Lori Duncan and Greg Nicholson and killed the children because, quote, they saw it. They could have been witnesses. So he strangled those, and tortured them pretty much in front of those babies too.
And it takes so long, strangulation, to kill someone.
That's what he said. Now, he shot them. I'm thinking he strangled them when he was torturing them, before.
Okay. Then just ended up.
That's what I think. But because, they gagged them, they tied them up, they binded them, all of that. So I'm sure he was struggling because, Greg was a grown man too, and he wasn't very old. So he was, had some power behind him. Another inmate named Ron McIntosh took the stand to tell jurors that Dustin had told him that he killed Lori's young girls because they, quote, wouldn't be quiet. They wouldn't shut up. Yet another man testified that Dustin confessed to him that Dustin made some of the people disappear and that he drove them out of the country and shot them. Not looking too good for you there, buddy. Of course, Dustin's lawyer, and he is a defense attorney, so, you got to work with what you have. He played all of this down, stating that Dustin was a very smart guy. Why would he, Dustin, confess this to, quote, a couple of crackheads who steal hogs? Because one of them did get in trouble for stealing hogs, and he did use crack. The attorney also mentioned that there's no DNA evidence to tie Dustin to the scene. And in fact, Dustin was not a killer at all, Jen. No. In fact, Dustin was only, quote, a young man infatuated with drug manufacturing, basically a nerd, end quote. Thank goodness.
Okay.
The jurors.
Basically a nerd.
Yeah. He's not a killer.
Okay. No, just a nerd. Yeah.
Thankfully, the jurors saw through that stupid statement. And, maybe the bolted to the table and the stun belt had a little bit to do with maybe it's a little bit more going on. Maybe he's not just a nerd. That would have quite the impact on you. I kind of recall only recently there was only one other one that had that going on, that just shows how dangerous they are, that you have to have them bolted to the floor and then you have the stun the stun belt on him that the bailiff holds, and at any minute he can press it, and then it takes him down to the ground. Dustin Honken was convicted on all 17 counts, and on Tuesday, October 11th, 2005, he was sentenced to death. Interesting to note here, he was the first person in the state of Iowa to be sentenced to death in over 40 years, since Iowa had repealed the death penalty law in 1965. The state's last execution occurred in 1963 when a man was hanged by the federal government for luring a doctor across the Mississippi River into Illinois and killing him. As we probably can imagine, Jen, this narcissist drug dealer spoke at his sentencing. Quote, "I have committed many wrongs, but I have never taken another life," Dustin said. Dustin also acknowledged the family's loss, saying they had suffered, quote, "a senseless destruction of human life," end quote. But then he added that, quote, "vengeance toward me is misguided." No, I don't think so, buddy. I think their vengeance is exactly where it is and should be and needs to be. Dustin apologized to his mother, saying, quote, "Were I a perennial, I would bloom for you next year so you could smile." And I do have to add here, and I didn't write it here, but because he was a smart guy, he knew chemistry, but he was also very well spoken, and he wrote pretty eloquently. And even the victims' families were kind of shocked about how well he spoke when he was giving his statement. Now, what I can only imagine is such a cruel twist to this brutal, senseless crime. Little 10-year-old Candy, Lori's daughter, Candy, the 10-year-old, her father was actually in a coma when she was murdered. During the trial, he would testify and say that learning that his sweet baby girl was gone was like waking up and having a body part removed.
I can believe that.
At the funeral for the little girls, that other little girl named Brittney, who was besties with Amber, the one we started the episode with, wrote a poem for her friend saying that Amber isn't just a color, she was my best friend. See, I'm tearing up right there. Oh my God. I just can't even. Dustin would continue to maintain his innocence until the ultimate justice finally came calling. On July 17th, 2020, Dustin Honken was executed by lethal injection. In his final moments, he recited Gerald Manley Hopkins' poem, Heaven, Heaven. "I have desired to go where springs not fail, to fields where flies no sharp and sided hail, and a few lilies blow, and I have asked to be where no storms come, where the green swell is in the havens dumb, and out of the swing of the sea." Following the poem, Dustin Honken uttered, "Hail Mary, Mother of God, pray for me." He was pronounced dead at 3:36 p.m. Central Standard Time. 52-year-old Dustin Honken became the first Iowan in more than 50 years to be executed. The one before that was the one executed in 1963 that I spoke about earlier. Now, I know we don't like to give our opinions on this stuff, and I'm sure everybody listening and you are going to put your 2 cents in here too. In regards to whom I think is just as responsible for the murders and maybe just as evil, and, she was a mother herself. Angela Johnson was convicted of 5 counts of murder in 2005. Angela would blame Dustin for manipulating her and making her assist him in the killings. Both times, Angela? Both times? Really?
It's got that Manson thing
Angela,
to it. You know what I mean?
I do. I could see you getting forced that first time and then trying to disappear. I don't know. And I'm sure there was the attorney, I didn't put it in here, but they were like, in Angela, he saw somebody that would do anything for Dustin, including murder. And that's why Dustin liked her.
We were talking about Pick Me Girls earlier. So.
Yes, we sure were, weren't we?
There you go. Prime example.
Angela Johnson was convicted on 4 counts and sentenced to death on December 19, 2005. She would face the judge and make a statement concerning Dustin, stating, quote, "I regret I wasn't strong enough." That's basically what she said, just, that she couldn't stand up to him. In March 2012, Johnson's death sentence was vacated, citing the inadequacy of her defense team. Described as, quote, "alarmingly dysfunctional," her defense team had failed her. In December 2014, federal prosecutors announced that they would not seek a second death sentence for Angela Johnson, and she was resentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. That is the story of Doogie Howser, Dustin Honken, nerd, chemistry whiz, become drug kingpin who takes all out. People that crossed him. I'm telling you, when I saw this, I was like...
I mean, drugs are bad, but come on. You know?
There was some other stuff I didn't even put in here because I'm telling you, it could go on and on. He was going to kill his brother's business associate because he was going to take a life insurance term policy out on him and kill him and get the money. And it's just ruthless. I don't know. It almost strikes me as a little nerdy guy that had no power growing up. You know, he's got red hair, freckles, tall, skinny, and just he got a little bit of power. And you know how that is.
And a lot of money. It boils down to money. Mm-hmm. I mean, power. But
he didn't want to. And when he was doing that sentence the first time for the 27 years, he was working to get out of there. He thought for sure he'd gotten away with it. And he did for years. I believe it was 8 years. It took, I don't do the math, but if somebody's good and wants to listen to when this, calculate it. But it took a long time, but he was really convinced he wouldn't. So I do have to give a shout out to my mafia drug pin failed Bobby. Yay, Bobby, doing the right thing there, right? And then she fell for all that. And like I said, this is, my cold, dead heart's usually cold and dead, but this one,
it's horrible. The kids always affect me more.
Well, and the little girl's still in her swimsuit, There was no reason that those kids, they could have just taken Lori. Actually, they should have just taken Greg. Just Greg. Like, you live by the sword, you die by the sword. He was a drug dealer person too. And that's not.
But that also, when they kill everybody, it also sends a message to everybody around them not to do anything to them,
Mm-hmm. And like the people in that town, everybody knew that he did this. He was involved. They just didn't really quite know the details. And just sitting there waiting for all this to happen. I don't know. It's just, I don't know. It's just the whole little girl thing. Like they could have, like I said, just taken Greg and leave Lori and the girls there. But what's the point? Just so stupid. Not sorry to see him go in this world. That's for sure. And I know you and I always talk about
But unfortunately, somebody else is just going to take his place.
Oh, I know. Always. And guess what? We'll probably cover them in the next week or two. So
exactly.
And I know that we've talked about this, about the death penalty and how we, sometimes we struggle. And then sometimes I am so, yep, see ya. And this was a, yep, see ya. Yeah. You got to go. Like, honestly.
No, I agree.
Honestly, if he would have just killed Greg and Terry, he probably would have just got life in prison. He'd probably still be alive. But the callousness to kill those sweet baby girls and their mother. For what? For what?
A message.
Dumb.
Yeah, because he can. He's cocky.
So anyway, I just, and there's a lot. I found some TV shows, lots of articles. I hope I did it justice. I hope I did Lori and the girls justice, really. See, now I'm going to cry again. God, it must be the rain, Jen. God. Woo.
It's menopause.
I guess. I just hate that. And they were so young. Lori was only 31.
I know.
Anyway, yeah. And then I love that Fred Tokers makes an appearance in this. He was, talk about a narcissist. Woo.
Oh, he's something.
I can't believe he didn't get murdered in jail. Like, I just can't believe it because.
For being a narc?
Yeah, because he was narking on everybody left and right. I guess they pretty much kept him in protective custody because they wanted help, And he
could have slashed everybody with those cheekbones that he had.
Right. Or those glasses. Yeah. And he, of course, loved this because, he was hoping to get the year shaved off, but also he got to get out and go testify, right? And so you get that attention, all that stuff. Yeah.
Monsters all around.
It really is. Drugs are never good. Nothing ever, Just
no.
Yeah.
And especially if he was making that much money, of course he has,
Oh, and I did check on Angela. She's still where she should be. She's still in prison.
You said she got life, right?
She did. Yeah. She did. I just wanted to check. I like to check and make sure
life
they didn't.
Should mean life.
Yep.
Not like 20 years. And then,
Which makes me, I love Canada, but it always kills me that their life is 25 years. So their life is never a life, Just bizarre. Anywho, that's it. Do we want to talk about anything?
We are going to take a dark history tour in the UK.
Yes, we are.
Next year in June.
And let me just brag about us a little bit, Jen. So we wanted to keep this small. We did. We really thought there's no way we're going to fill up the 12 seats.
We didn't think it was going to happen.
That was our initial goal. Well, and then talking to them, they're like, everything will be a little bit cheaper if you get more people on, and it's just whatever. So then we keep opening up more seats. I think we're about done with that. We got a few seats left. You'll tell the good people about that in a minute.
I think 4 or 5. I'm not for sure. I haven't checked.
We did it. We really did. It's amazing.
And it's going to be so much fun. Like there's so many tours we're going to go on. And like I said in the last episode, we're going to do a Jack the Ripper tour when we go to London. And I'll give you the link of this TikToker who thinks, everybody has theories on who they think is Jack the Ripper, right? Mm-hmm. Patricia Cornwell thought it was an artist, Walter Snickert.
Oh.
Well, this girl actually, on TikTok, woman, I should say, actually believes it was another artist. Oh. But her artist is Edgar Degas.
Oh.
The one who did all the ballerinas.
Yes. Also, he was the one that was with, I want to say Selma Hayek. Wasn't Selma, but the Frida Kahlo. They were together, and he cheated on her all the time. That's another story. See, again, useless
he was a male
trivia.
Chauvinist.
Useless trivia stays up in my head. I can't.
He and Snickert were friends, were buddies.
Really?
And back in the 19th century, Degas is famous for his ballerinas, right? Mm-hmm. Like the 14-year-old ballerina sculpture that he did.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
She's saying that, and it's true, ballerinas in the 19th century were sex workers.
You told me that. I had no idea.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and Jack the Ripper mostly went after sex workers. Now, granted, Degas was in France, but he also would travel frequently to London.
Mm-hmm.
And right before the Jack the Ripper murder started happening, there was a big murder that happened in France that is pretty much like the Jack the Ripper murders. So it's very, very interesting. I mean, she has a very strong case, I think, that Edgar Degas was Jack the Ripper.
Wouldn't that be something?
Uh-huh. I mean, the girl is as cute as can be with, Yeah, it's pretty interesting. Like, she's very, very interesting, and she's very convincing that he could be Jack the Ripper. But I'll send you the link to the article, and we'll put it in the show notes to where it talks, and then I think in the article will give her TikTok name.
We'll plug her a little bit. Look it up. Mm-hmm. And then she can send us all her money. Just kidding.
Yeah, I actually wanted to reach out to her and see if she'll come on and talk to us, but she's writing a book, so I'm not for sure if she'd do that.
Since he was a painter and a sculptor, you would think, I don't know, you would think that they would be able to get at least a fingerprint, but I don't know. Maybe they didn't get any fingerprints from Jack the Ripper, right? I don't know.
I don't even think they had fingerprints back then.
That's what I'm saying.
It's early, 18-something or other. Like, even one of the Shaws from one of the victims wasn't even kept. A police officer, I believe, took it and donated it, or not donated it, but gave it to his wife or something.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they just didn't pick the clues up. But he was misogynist, he was anti-Semitic, all sorts of stuff, and it perfectly plays into who everybody believes Jack the Ripper is.
Interesting.
It's very, very interesting. Trust me. She's got me going, yeah, it is Degas. It is him.
Yeah.
But like some of the pictures that he has, she goes into it. So it's very interesting. I'm telling you.
I'll be checking that out. Send it to me later on,
I will.
like now. All right. I think that was a little bit longer episode. Well, for me it was.
But anyway, if you want to go to the tour with us and you want to see Jack the Ripper's places where he committed murders, if you want to go to Scotland and visit the underground cities or tour York murder tours and see ancient sites, I will make sure that Cam posts a link to everything in the show notes.
Yes, ma'am.
And you can always email us at ourtruecrimepodcast@gmail.com and we will give you all the information.
We will. Yes, we will.
It'll be a lot of fun.
I can't wait.
So anyway, that's it. That's all I got.
That's all I got too. So remember, catch us next week. Same bat time, same bat channel. That saying's never going to get old for me because I'm a nerd. Remember, lock your doors.
Just reminded me, do you know in the 70s, 60s, 70s, the Adam West Batman thing that came from?
Mm-hmm.
Do you know when they put up maps of Gotham City?
Mm-hmm.
That's a map of old St. Louis back in the 1800s.
Get out.
It is. I just learned that. Isn't that cool?
Talk about the useless trivia that lives free in our head.
I know. So anyway,
you and I
said,
putting our powers together, we could actually be kind of smart, I bet.
We could pass those IQ tests, I bet.
I wouldn't go that far.
Finally.
I wouldn't go that far. I'm just saying, like, on surface, it would seem like we kind of are intelligent. Maybe.
We can be.
Yeah.
We can be. So anyway, you said lock your doors, and I'm going to say pass by those open windows.
Bye-bye.
Love ya.
Today's episode was researched and written by me, Cam. For more information about this episode, as well as all the sources I used, please check out our show notes or the podcast website at ourtruecrimepodcast.com. Our True Crime Podcast is developed and created by hosts Jen and Cam. Original music and audio mix of all our True Crime Podcast episodes is courtesy of Nico Vertesi from We Talk of Dreams. Listener discretion is provided by Edward October from October Pod VHS. Our True Crime Podcast is executive produced by Nico Vertesi and Dick Vane. Make sure to like and subscribe to Our True Crime Podcast wherever you listen to your podcast. We can be reached on Instagram and Facebook at Our True Crime Podcast or on Twitter at Our True Crime Pod. You can email us at ourtruecrimepodcast@gmail.com. If you really like the show, make sure to check out our Patreon at Our True Crime Podcast. Our True Crime Podcast is an OTC production.